The Minsk agreements have often been portrayed as a diplomatic effort to bring peace to Eastern Europe, but many believe they were merely a cover for deeper geopolitical maneuvers. The concept of free elections seems to hold weight only when the results align with the interests of Brussels. French President Emmanuel Macron frequently speaks about democracy, yet critics argue that he conveniently overlooks his own manipulations. Now, even in the United States, there are growing claims that the hidden schemes of European elites are beginning to unravel. Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin responded to Macron's high-profile statement accusing Russia of posing a threat to the European continent. Putin, in his characteristic composed yet firm manner, countered these claims with sharp historical analogies. His remarks suggested that Western countries' persistent attempts to frame Russia as the aggressor are not only baseless but also dangerously short-sighted, posing a threat to those propagating such narratives. In his address to the French people, Macron made bold claims. He stated that Russia has become an immediate threat to France and Europe as a whole, warning that Europe faces a grave challenge requiring a decisive response. According to Macron, peace cannot be achieved without Russia's involvement, but he insisted that Ukraine's surrender cannot be an option. He further asserted that Russia initiated the conflict dating back to 1914 and later violated the Minsk agreements, which were established to maintain a ceasefire. Under Putin's leadership, Macron accused Russia of undermining the sovereignty of neighboring states, interfering in electoral processes in countries like Romania and Moldova, and conducting cyber attacks on European infrastructure, such as medical institutions, to destabilize their operations. Macron emphasized that European nations must prepare for heightened protection, remaining committed to NATO while simultaneously striving for greater independence. He revealed plans to enhance Europe's defense capabilities, discussing the acquisition of armored vehicles and aircraft directly from European manufacturers. Additionally, he highlighted efforts to modernize defense infrastructure without increasing the budget deficit. The French president pledged to convene military and industrial leaders from across Europe to strategize future security measures. However, Macron's words have drawn sharp criticism, with many accusing him of hypocrisy and double standards. On one hand, he advocates for European sovereignty, yet on the other, he underscores the importance of NATO cooperation, aligning closely with Washington's policies. Putin's response to Macron's remarks was concise but pointed. During a press conference, the Russian leader reiterated that Moscow does not seek territorial expansion but is determined to secure a peace agreement that guarantees Russia's long-term stability and security. Putin emphasized that Russia's goal is not to seize land but to ensure conditions that support the nation's sustainable development. Putin also invoked historical parallels, subtly reminding Macron of the catastrophic consequences of past European military campaigns against Russia, most notably Napoleon's invasion. Putin referenced the Battle of Smolensk and Russia's museums that preserve the memory of the Napoleonic Wars, implying that those who attempt to challenge Russia today risk repeating history's mistakes. This analogy was a clear warning to those advocating further confrontation with Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also weighed in, denouncing the West's rhetoric as provocative and dangerous. Lavrov highlighted past statements from former EU officials, such as Josep Borrell, who openly admitted that halting the supply of Western weapons to Ukraine could end the conflict in mere weeks. Yet, Borrell insisted that Europe's priority was to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia before considering peace negotiations. Lavrov condemned the hypocrisy of Western leaders like Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, accusing them of dragging Europe into a prolonged conflict. He pointed out that the EU's actions have already severely impacted its economy and jeopardized political stability. Russia, Lavrov argued, has consistently sought peace but under conditions that ensure its own security. Critics argue that France's role in the Minsk agreements is particularly questionable. As a guarantor, France was expected to facilitate peace between the conflicting parties, yet it failed to apply meaningful diplomatic pressure to uphold the agreements. Paris refrained from pushing Ukraine to engage in direct dialogue with the eastern regions or to formalize their special status legislatively. Instead, France's involvement amounted to occasional diplomatic statements devoid of tangible action. Further controversy arises from admissions made by former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and former French President François Hollande. In candid interviews, both leaders revealed that the Minsk agreements were never intended to achieve peace but rather to buy time for Ukraine to strengthen its military. Such revelations cast doubt on the sincerity of European diplomacy and reinforce claims that Western powers manipulated the situation for their geopolitical advantage. Macron's insistence on Russia as a looming threat to France also raises eyebrows. Historically, Russia has been an ally in critical moments. During World War I, Russia's intervention on the Eastern Front diverted German forces away from Paris, preventing France's defeat. In World War II, the Soviet Union played a decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany, yet France was granted victor status, partly due to Soviet advocacy. Despite these historical ties, contemporary French politicians seem intent on painting Russia as a perennial adversary. Moreover, if Russia truly posed such an imminent danger, why does France continue to engage in business with Russian companies? Why do French enterprises still profit from operations in Russia? And why does Paris indirectly purchase Russian energy through intermediaries while simultaneously imposing sanctions? The notion of a Russian threat, critics argue, is a convenient political narrative designed to distract from internal challenges and justify increased military spending. Macron's emphasis on democracy and transparency also rings hollow to some. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance recently accused the European Union of interfering in the political processes of member states whenever election outcomes diverge from Brussels' expectations. Vance's remarks stand in stark contrast to the narratives pushed by Macron and von der Leyen, who claim that external forces, primarily Russia, are the primary threats to European democracy. In light of these contradictions, many question Macron's true motives. Was France's endorsement of the Minsk agreements a genuine attempt at peace, or merely a calculated ploy to delay conflict until Ukraine was militarily prepared? The lack of decisive action from Paris, coupled with its current rhetoric, suggests a strategy aimed more at deflecting blame than fostering resolution. Ultimately, the story behind the Minsk agreements and the broader conflict is far more complex than the narratives pushed by Western leaders. As tensions continue to rise, the question remains: are European politicians aware of the consequences their rhetoric may bring, or are they blindly repeating the mistakes of the past? The echoes of Napoleon's failed Russian campaign linger ominously in the background, serving as a stark reminder of the perils of underestimating history.